I came home on Christmas Eve expecting warmth, maybe the smell of cinnamon. Instead, the house was silent, too silent. Grandma sat alone at the table eating cold leftovers under a flickering kitchen light. A crumpled note waited beside her plate. We used your $8,500 for a family cruise. Take care of Grandma. Mom, my surgery money. Gone. Grandma's voice trembled as she whispered, Ethan, there's something I never told you. Something in me cracked clean, quiet, final. But what they didn't know was, before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by your own family. Because what happened next didn't just ruin my Christmas. It exposed the truth I'd been trained my whole life to ignore. Now let me take you back to where all of this really started. I didn't grow up expecting to be the outsider in my own family. When I was little, I thought every home felt like ours, loud, busy, uneven, in ways you couldn't name yet. But even then, the cracks were there, quiet and sharp. One of my earliest memories is sitting at our old kitchen table, my legs barely reaching the floor. Mom was serving dinner pot roast, the kind that filled the whole house with steam. She loaded Jacob's plate first, then Emily's big slices dripping with juice. When she reached mine, she scraped the dry edges from the bottom of the pan. You don't need much, Ethan, she said, already turning away. I didn't understand the sting then, but it stuck somewhere deep like a splinter waiting for years to work its way out. Middle school made it obvious. I won a district science award, a big deal at the time. There's a picture of me holding the certificate, nervous smile, oversized glasses. But the photo they framed in the living room was different, Mom and Dad posing proudly with Jacob. He hadn't won anything. He wasn't even holding a certificate. He looks better in photos, Mom said when I asked. I laughed it off, but something in me shrank a little. I didn't know it then. But moments like that were shaping the version of me who would spend years apologizing for taking up space. Things got louder when I turned 17. That was the year Grandma Martha fell down the back stairs. She was pale, gripping the rail, whispering for help. Jacob was panicking for a different reason. He'd stolen her pain meds earlier that week and sold them to his friends. He cornered me in the hallway, breath heavy with beer. Just say she misplaced them, he hissed. Don't screw me over. Mom backed him instantly. Help your brother. Stop making things harder than they already are. When I refused, the house exploded. Dad slammed a cabinet door so hard the plates rattled. Jacob threw a mug at the wall, not at me, but close enough. And Mom said the lines that would replay in my head for years. If you're going to act like a stranger, then be one. She tossed my jacket at my feet and walked away. That night, I left with a trash bag of clothes and a knot in my throat. I didn't know it back then, but that exile marked the first time I realized kindness only mattered when it benefited them. College wasn't glamorous. I worked night shifts unloading trucks, then drove Uber on weekends. Any spare dollar went home because they always needed something. Ethan, can you help Emily with her car payment? Ethan, your dad's stuck again. Ethan, Jacob's job fell through. Each message felt like a small tug pulling parts of me away until I barely recognized what was left. One Thanksgiving, I brought a store-brand pumpkin pie after a double shift. Mom glanced at it, wrinkled her nose, and pushed it aside. We already have dessert, she said, pointing at the bakery box Emily brought. No one touched mine. I laughed with them, pretended it didn't matter. But it carved deeper than I admitted. If there was one person who saw me, really saw me, it was Grandma. When she landed in the hospital after another fall, she looked up with tired eyes and whispered, I knew you'd come. She squeezed my hand like she'd been holding her breath. You always show up, sweetheart. I didn't understand the weight of that sentence then, but it would come back years later, sitting across from her in a cold kitchen littered with holiday leftovers. Back then, I told myself our family was just complicated. But the truth was simpler. I'd been trained to accept less. And the night I found that note on Christmas Eve, every memory I'd buried rose all at once, sharp, clear, undeniable. Grandma wasn't loud, and she wasn't dramatic, but she noticed everything. She always had. When I turned 19 and moved into a tiny apartment with a leaking ceiling and a fridge that hummed like a dying engine, she called every Sunday. Eat something real today, she'd say. I can hear your stomach through the phone. She'd Mail me $5 bills tucked inside birthday cards, even when the rest of the family forgot I existed. I didn't think much of those small gestures back then. I didn't know they'd become the lifeline I'd cling to years later. It was around 2016 when she first mentioned something odd about her pension account. "I keep getting locked out?" she murmured, chewing her lip. Her hands trembled as she handed me her tablet. I assumed it was just age, just forgotten passwords. I reset the login for her or watched her relax when the numbers appeared on the screen. "See," I said, "everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. I couldn't have known then that Mom was already inside that account, draining small amounts at first, then bigger ones. Quiet theft, hiding under a familiar email address. A few months later, Jacob rolled into the driveway with shiny new rims. "Check these out," he bragged, tapping the chrome like he'd earned it. Dad clapped him on the back, proud and oblivious. Emily laughed and took photos for Instagram. When I asked how he paid for them, Jacob smirked. "Don't worry about it." I didn't worry. I should have. I didn't know it then, but those rims were bought with money taken from the woman who baked us birthday cakes even when no one else bothered to show up. Life kept going. I kept working. I kept giving. And the cycle kept chewing through me. One humid summer afternoon, Emily called, sobbing because she'd crashed her car into someone's mailbox. "Please, Ethan. Mom's going to kill me." I sent her $600, the same $600 I'd saved for new tires. When I told Mom, she shrugged. That's what siblings do. She didn't ask how I'd get to work that week. She never asked anything that didn't benefit her. But the moment that haunts me most happened 2 Thanksgivings before the cruise. Grandma was slower that year, forgetting simple things. When she dropped her fork, the clang echoed too loud, like something breaking. "Mom, can you try not to make a mess?" Linda snapped without looking up from her phone. I watched Grandma shrink into herself, shoulders folding inward, as if she were apologizing for breathing. Shame crawled up my spine, hot and bitter. I tried to laugh it off with the rest of them, but inside something twisted. I didn't know it then, but that twist would become the knife they'd eventually hand me. There was one more memory, one I'd buried under years of denial. Dad pulling me aside late at night, smelling like beer and disappointment. "You'll never amount to much, Ethan. Not like Jacob. He's a real man. You're just soft." The words landed with a sting that lodged deep. And for years I worked like a man trying to outrun a sentence he never deserved. Looking back now, the signs weren't subtle. They were neon. Every slight, every request, every forgotten moment, it all stacked up quietly inside me. And as I stood in that kitchen on Christmas Eve, the refrigerator humming behind me, Grandma whispering, "There's more you don't know," it all crashed down at once. Every buried humiliation, every stolen dollar, every time they chose convenience over love. That night didn't just break me, it woke me. The morning after Christmas felt wrong the moment I opened my eyes. Not because of the cold, but because the house itself seemed to be holding its breath, like even the walls knew something had shifted. I lay on the sagging couch for a minute, staring at the ceiling stain that looked like a spreading bruise, before finally sitting up. The heater rattled. The air smelled faintly of dust, and Grandma was already in the kitchen, humming a tune too soft to hide her anxiety. When I walked in, she pushed a bowl of oatmeal toward me. "Eat, sweetheart," she said, trying to sound steady. Her hands, though, gave her away. They trembled just a little, like she was afraid I might vanish the way the rest of them did. I tried to thank her, but my throat felt tight. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the family group chat, and scrolled upward. Seeing it all at once, months of messages asking for money and nothing else, felt like someone pressing a thumb into a bruise that hadn't healed. "Mom, Ethan, can you transfer $300 Jacob's short this month? Emily." "Hey, can you cover my card? I'll pay you back next week." "Dad, need a favor. Urgent." Then weeks of silence. It hit me harder than I expected. Their affection had always been conditional. I just never allowed myself to say it out loud. Around noon, I made the mistake of opening Instagram. Emily's newest post filled my screen, her and Jacob on the balcony of the majestic Aurora, clinking champagne glasses with ocean glittering behind them. both of them wearing robes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But the caption was the punchline. Finally, some peace away from all the leeches and negativity. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. Leeches. She was talking about me, about Grandma, about anyone who didn't serve their comfort or their image. My fingers went cold on the phone. If the note had cracked something inside me, that caption shattered it. By late afternoon, I was in the garage. The place smelled like old oil and wet cardboard. Dust clung to the air in the beams of sunlight sneaking through the grimy window. I wasn't looking for confrontation. I was looking for truth, real truth, something I could hold in my hands. Grandma followed me in a small stool, tucked under her arm. She sat quietly watching me pull open drawers stuffed with old tax forms and forgotten bills. After a few minutes, she cleared her throat softly. "There's something you should see." She reached into the bottom drawer and pulled out a worn notebook. The edges frayed the cover soft with age. She handed it to me like it was something fragile. "I started writing things down a while ago," she said, folding her hands in her lap. I didn't want to assume the worst, but things weren't adding up. Inside were handwritten notes, dates, amounts, little comments like "Linda said," "needed for groceries," or "withdrawal happened again." Some entries circled in red, others underlined with shaky lines. My chest tightened as I flipped page after page. Some entries went back 7 years. "You kept this to yourself," I whispered. She exhaled slowly, eyes lowering. "I didn't want to burden you. You already do so much." I found the first major red flag buried between receipts, 2 signatures side by side, one clearly hers, the other a messy imitation. "Grandma," I said quietly, "you didn't sign this." Her mouth trembled before she nodded. "I know." That was the moment the anger inside me stopped being heat and became ice. A clean, sharp clarity filled my lungs. Someone had forged her name. Someone in this house. That night after she went to bed, I sat at the dining table with my laptop. The room was dim except for the sickly glow of the overhead bulb. Logging into her pension account felt like crossing a line I couldn't return from, but I did it anyway. What I found was worse than anything I'd imagined. Dozens of withdrawals. Amounts that matched days Mom had asked me for a little help. Transfer logs traced back to devices registered under my parents' network. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I began building a spreadsheet, dates, amount screenshots, device IDs. Every click was another piece of the puzzle snapping into place. My breath turned shallow. My hands shook. But I kept going because the more I found, the more I realized something terrifying. They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd been stealing from Grandma for years. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I was focused. By the next morning, the evidence on my laptop felt heavier than any weight I'd ever carried. Every tab I opened showed another pattern, another withdrawal, another lie like my entire life had been rewritten in spreadsheets and login logs. But I needed more than digital footprints. I needed corroboration, something human, something they couldn't twist. Around 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but some instinct told me to pick up. "Ethan." The voice was shaky, breathy. It took me a second to recognize it. "Kelly, Jacob's wife. I shouldn't be calling you," she whispered, "but I can't keep pretending." My grip tightened on the phone. "Pretending what?" She inhaled sharply like she was bracing for impact. "Jacob told everyone you were okay with the money. He said you didn't need it right now. He said your surgery was optional." "And your mom?" She laughed. "She said you'd forgive them like always." My chest hollowed out. And the worst part, Kelly's voice cracked. "They joked about leaving your grandma. Jacob said she's old enough that she wouldn't notice. Ethan." They laughed about it. For a moment, all I heard was the blood rushing in my ears. "Kelly," I said quietly, "will you tell the truth if I need you to?" "Not for me. For Grandma." There was a long pause. Then a faint trembling. "Yes." When the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. The person looking back wasn't the version of me my family had trained a quiet yes man, desperate for scraps. There was someone sharper in my eyes, someone done bleeding. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside to get the mail. The freezing air slapped me awake. That's when I noticed Mr. Bennett, our elderly neighbor, waving me over with an urgency that didn't match his usual shuffle. "Morning, son," he said, pulling his jacket tighter. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but, well, it didn't sit right. He told me he'd been outside the morning my family left for the cruise. Your mom was stuffing a big envelope into the trunk, he said. Thick one. Looked like cash or documents. She kept looking over her shoulder. He shook his head. Leaving your grandma behind like that didn't seem right. A cold, precise click happened somewhere inside me. Another puzzle piece, another witness, another truth pointing in the same direction. That night after Grandma went to bed, I sat alone at the dining table. The heater hummed, the refrigerator buzzed, and the laptop glowed like a spotlight, forcing me to confront everything I'd spent years avoiding. I opened a new document and titled it Formal Report Elder Financial Exploitation. Then I gathered everything, the forged signature. Grandma's notebook, banking logs, screenshots, photos of receipts, the timeline I'd built. Mr. Bennett's statement, what? And finally, the voice recording from Kelly. When I hovered over the file to attach it, something inside me hesitated. A lifetime of conditioning whispered the same tired script. They're still your family. You're being dramatic. You're overreacting. I forced my hand to move anyway. Once the recording attached, the guilt drained out of me like dirty water. All that remained was clarity, cold, sober clarity. Grandma appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her robe, leaning heavily on her cane. You're doing what needs to be done, she said softly. They won't stop unless someone stops them. Her voice didn't shake. Mine almost did. I don't want to lose them, I admitted. She stepped closer, placing her warm, fragile hand over mine. Sweetheart, you can't lose people who never chose you in the first place. That sentence cut cleaner than any evidence I'd collected. When she went back to bed, I stayed up for another hour staring at the unsent email. Every attachment lined up like soldiers ready for war. I didn't send it. Not yet. Because I wanted one thing first, one moment, one final truth to land where it belonged. I wanted to look my family in the eye while holding the blade they'd sharpened for years. The storm was coming, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of lightning. 3 days later, just after sunset, the front door burst open like the house itself flinched. I was already at the kitchen table, laptop open, the only light coming from the overhead bulb that buzzed like a dying insect. Grandma sat in the living room, wrapped in her blanket, watching the doorway with a quiet steadiness like she'd been waiting decades for this exact moment. Emily stumbled in, first dragging a glossy suitcase, her hair still braided from the ship's spa. God, I need a shower, she groaned. This house smells like dust. Jacob followed, yawning loudly, patting his stomach. That last buffet killed me. Totally worth it, though. Mom walked in behind them, sunglasses still on despite the dark. She scanned the room with a look of irritation, then addressed me without a hello. Did nobody clean while we were gone? Dad stepped in last, red-faced and bloated. When he saw me, he made a face like he'd stepped in something unpleasant. Oh, you're still here? Not a flicker of guilt, not a trace of shame, just entitlement. I didn't stand. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, sit down. Emily scoffed. Ethan, seriously, I'm exhausted. Sit. This time my voice carried something I didn't know I had, authority. Chairs scraped against the tile, sharp grating, unwilling. Mom sat across from me, arms crossed. Jacob slumped down like he owned the place. Dad leaned back, legs spread. Emily plugged her phone into the wall, not even looking at me. Then I turned the laptop toward them. The glow hit their faces all at once, pale blue, cold, surgical. Mom frowned. What is this, your Christmas gift? I said. The spreadsheet opened first. Withdrawals, logins, transfers, 7 years' worth of theft spelled out in neat rows. Grandma's account bleeding slowly, predictably, systematically. Mom's face cracked first. Where did you get this? From the bank, I said, from her account. The one you shouldn't have had access to. I was helping her. Mom snapped, voice raising. Then why did the withdrawals match days you told me you needed a loan? I asked. Before she could answer, I clicked again. Screenshots flooded the screen. Emily's emergencies at Sephora, Jacob's cash withdrawals, at Dad's favorite gas station, email threads between Mom and Emily planning the cruise, complaining about how I never fight back, how I always give in. Emily's voice wavered. You weren't supposed to see those. Jacob jumped in, angry and loud. You don't get to go through our stuff. I clicked again. A voice recording. Kelly's voice filled the room, fractured and shaking. Jacob said leaving your grandma wasn't a big deal. He said Ethan would get over it. They all laughed, Ethan. They laughed. Jacob shot to his feet. She had no right. She asked me to record it, I said. Then I clicked the last file. 2 signatures. Grandma's real one and the forged one. Mom inhaled sharply, her chair creaking. Ethan, you're overreacting. You used my surgery money for a cruise. I kept my voice level, quiet, deadly. And you left Grandma alone on Christmas. Silence hit the room like a blunt force. Then Grandma rose from the living room doorway, slow, deliberate, leaning on her cane. She looked at each of her children with a kind of grief that belonged to someone who'd already forgiven them 100 times too many. I gave you everything, she whispered, and you repaid me with this. Mom looked away. Dad clenched his jaw. Emily cried. Jacob glared, fists curled. I reached for the mouse. You have 48 hours to return every dollar I said. Mom's voice cracked. Or what I leaned back. Let the cold smile form. Let the truth sit between us like a blade. Or I hit send. They left the kitchen without a word, one by one, like ghosts slipping out of a room they no longer recognized. No yelling, no excuses, no apologies. Just silence. Thick, trembling, guilty. When the last door slammed, the whole house seemed to exhale. The heater clicked on. The fridge hummed. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was charged like the air before a storm. I didn't sleep, not a minute. I sat on the couch, with the laptop open, the email draft, glowing like a loaded weapon pointed at everything they'd built. Every attachment, screenshots, bank records, signatures. Kelly's recording sat neatly arranged as if waiting for a command. 48 hours. I'd given them that. Now, the clock had started ticking. Around 2 a.m., I heard Grandma's soft footsteps. She walked out wrapped in her robe, her hair messy from sleep, but her eyes sharp, clearer than I'd seen them in years. You're still awake, she murmured, lowering herself beside me. I don't know if they'll pay a single dollar back, I admitted. My voice felt too small for the truth sitting between us. She touched my hand. Her palm was warm, grounding. Whether they do or not doesn't change what you did tonight. She gave a tired smile. For the first time they saw you, the real you, and that matters. The next morning, nothing. No calls, no messages, no knocks on the door. By noon the second day, Jacob snapped first. A string of angry texts popped up, each one more frantic than the last, calling me dramatic, selfish, ungrateful. Emily posted an Instagram story full of vague quotes about toxic people needing attention. Mom sent a single message. We can talk this out. No need to escalate. None of them mentioned Grandma. None said sorry. None said we'll fix this. And that told me everything. That night the wind howled against the windows, rattling them like bones. The house felt colder, but my hands were steady as I sat back down at the table. The email draft waited, cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Grandma appeared again, leaning on her cane. They think you're bluffing, she said softly. They always thought that. I nodded. Not this time. I took a breath. A long, quiet one, the kind that comes right before you step into a new version of yourself. Then I clicked. The soft whoosh of the email sending was barely audible, but it echoed through the house like thunder. It went to the state authorities, the ombudsman, the bank's fraud department, too far to pull back, too loud to ignore. They believed they'd broken me, but all they'd really done was hand me the leverage I needed. And this time the fallout would be theirs. So that's where I'll pause the story for now. The fallout, the investigations, the calls they finally started making when it was already too late. That's the next chapter. But if you've ever sat at a family table and felt invisible, If you've ever been treated like an ATM or an afterthought, then you already understand why I finally drew the line and why I won't step back from it. If you've ever felt that kind of betrayal hit, like drop a comment and subscribe. This story isn't over.